Reflections, Chapter 10, Lesson 4. Approval and the Bill of Rights. And you'll see a timeline at the top. 1787, the U.S. Constitution is completed, ratified in 88, and then 3 years later, the Bill of Rights is added to the Constitution. What to know? What is the Bill of Rights and why was it added to the Constitution? Describe the struggle to get the Constitution approved. Explain the key rights guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. Describe the development of the United States government. Vocabulary: ratify, ratify. Federalist, federalist. Anti-federalist, anti-federalist. Due process of law, due process. Reserved powers, cabinet, political party, and then John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Banneker. You are there. It is September 1787, and you're a carpenter's apprentice living in Philadelphia. For the last 2 months, you've heard people around the city talking about an important meeting taking place at the State House, Independence Hall. Today is your day off, so you've decided to walk downtown in hopes of hearing some news. When you arrive, you see Benjamin Franklin leaving the State House. He looks tired but happy. "What's the good news, Mr. Franklin?" you ask as he steps into his sedan chair. "It is finally finished," he says and waves goodbye. Delegates to the convention knew that the struggle to ratify or approve the Constitution would not be an easy one. The struggle to ratify. Your first section, the struggle to ratify. On September 17, 1787, work on the Constitution was completed. 39 delegates were still present at the convention, and all but 3 of them, Elbridge Gerry, George Mason, and Edmund Randolph, signed the Constitution. These 3 delegates did not sign, so all but 3 of them. These 3 delegates did not sign because they disagreed with parts of the final document. As the delegates were signing the document, Benjamin Franklin stated how confident he felt in the nation's future. During the convention, Franklin had often looked at the chair used by George Washington. Its high back had a carving of the sun on it. Franklin had not been able to decide if the sun was supposed to be rising or setting. Now he said, "I have the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun." The Constitution was not yet the law of the land. According to Article 7, 9 of the 13 states had to ratify or approve the Constitution before it would be official. In each state, voters elected delegates to a state convention. These delegates would vote for or against the Constitution. At the state conventions, arguments began again. Many state delegates wanted the Constitution to limit the power of the federal government and to protect the basic rights of the people. Some delegates said they would be more willing to approve the Constitution if a bill or list of rights were added to it. Supporters of the Constitution promised to propose a Bill of Rights after the Constitution was ratified. What would adding a Bill of Rights to the Constitution do? The Constitution of the United States is the oldest written national constitution. It is also the shortest. The vote of approval. The first state to call for a vote on the Constitution was Delaware. In December 1787, all the Delaware state delegates voted to ratify the Constitution. Later that month, delegates in Pennsylvania and New Jersey also approved the Constitution. In January 1788, delegates in Georgia and Connecticut ratified it. Those in favor of the Constitution and those against it competed for the support of the remaining 8 states. Those citizens who favored the Constitution came to be called Federalists. Federalists wanted a strong federal government. Those who disagreed with the Federalists became known as anti-Federalists. Because the Constitution did not yet include a Bill of Rights, the anti-Federalists feared that the national government would have too much power. The promise of a Bill of Rights, however, helped change the minds of many people. In February 1788, Massachusetts ratified the Constitution. In the spring, Maryland and South Carolina did the same. Then, on June 21st, 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the Constitution. That was the number of states needed to put the Constitution into effect. 4 days later, Virginia also ratified it, and New York followed in July. By the spring of 1789, the new government was at work. Later that year, North Carolina approved the Constitution. Rhode Island gave its approval in 1790. Why do you think some anti-Federalists changed their minds about the Constitution? Constitution ratification vote. Analyze tables. Alexander Hamilton below worked to convince others of the need for a strong federal government. Ratification of the Constitution made such a government possible. In which state was the vote closest to being a tie? For, against. Which state was closest to being a tie? Rhode Island was close, only 2 votes apart. Newspapers printed the Bill of Rights so that people could read it. The Bill of Rights. As promised, not long after the states ratified the Constitution, 10 amendments were added to protect the rights of the people. These 10 amendments, called the Bill of Rights, became part of the Constitution in 1791. The First Amendment gives people the freedom to follow any religion, or none at all. It also says the government cannot promote or financially support any religion. The First Amendment also protects freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right of people to assemble or gather together. The Second Amendment protects people's right to have weapons. The Third Amendment says the government cannot force people to house soldiers in peacetime. The Fourth Amendment protects people against unreasonable searches of their homes. The Fifth through Eighth Amendments deal with due process of law. This term means that people have the right to a fair public trial by jury. They do not have to testify against themselves in court. If you've ever heard someone say pleading the Fifth, they're pleading the Fifth Amendment. They do not have to testify against themselves in court. And they have the right to have a lawyer defend them. If convicted, they cannot be sentenced to any cruel punishments. The Ninth Amendment says the people have many other rights not specifically listed in the Constitution. The 10th Amendment says that the national government can do only the things that are listed in the Constitution. This means that all other authority, called the reserved powers, belong to the states or to the people. Why is the First Amendment important? Your next section. The new government. In 1789, George Washington was elected to be the nation's first president. John Adams became the first vice president. Working with Congress, Washington set up a State Department, a Treasury Department, and a War Department. Together, the heads of these departments and others set up what would come to be known as the Cabinet. Cabinet members advise the president. Two members of Washington's cabinet began to argue about what was best for the United States. Alexander Hamilton wanted a stronger central government. Thomas Jefferson wanted less central government. This argument led to the rise of political parties. A political party is a group that tries to elect officials who will support its policies. Hamilton's followers formed the Federalist Party. Jefferson's supporters became the Democratic Republican Party, also known as the Jeffersonian Republicans. In Congress, members of both parties agreed to build a national capital on the Potomac River. George Washington chose the location for the city that came to carry his name. Sir George Washington chose the location for Washington, D.C. Benjamin Banneker, a free African American, helped the architect Pierre Charles L'Enfant plan the nation's capital. In 1800, the federal government was moved from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. George Washington served as president for 2 terms, each of which was 4 years long. Many people wanted him to run for a 3rd term. He refused because he did not think a president should hold power for life. His decision set an example for future presidents. It set a precedent for future presidents. Benjamin Banneker helped measure the land known as the District of Columbia, D.C., where the national capital was built. In the election of 1796, the Federalist Party, led by Alexander Hamilton, backed John Adams as the candidate for president. The Jeffersonian Republican Party backed Thomas Jefferson. When the votes were counted, Adams had won. On March 4th, 1797, John Adams became the second president of the United States. The day he took the oath of office was an important day in history. It was the first time that the United States had changed leaders by means of a peaceful election. Why do you think it was necessary for the president to have a cabinet? Summary. After a long struggle, the new Constitution was ratified in 1788. In 1789, the new government began with George Washington serving as the first president. The Bill of Rights was added in 1791. Here's John Adams. Questions for review. Number 1. What is the Bill of Rights, and why was it added to the Constitution? What does ratify mean? What rights does the Bill of Rights guarantee? What is the role of cabinet members? The United States Constitution, points of view. Delegates to the Constitutional Convention created a new plan of government. Americans had different ideas about how this plan would affect their state governments and their individual liberties. Here are some points of view that reflect those different ideas about the new Constitution. In their own words, John Adams, quote, "A result of compromise cannot perfectly coincide with everyone's idea of perfection. But I hope to hear of its adoption by all states." George Mason, quote, "There never was a government over a very extensive country without destroying the liberties of the people. Why is there one exception? Where is there one exception to this general rule?" George Washington, quote, "I sincerely believe it is the best that could be obtained at this time. The adoption of it is, in my opinion, desirable." Mercy Otis Warren, quote, "There is no security in the Constitution either for the rights of conscience or for the liberty of the press." Before the Bill of Rights. Okay, questions for review. This is on page 451.